Hello friends, Rotoworld's Josh Norris here with another episode of the Rotoworld Football Podcast, joined as always on these Wednesdays/Thursdays/whatever day it is, it's Ian Hartitz. Love those sign language signs you make every single week.
Salute the listeners, Josh.
Okay, that's what it is.
So we do it for.
So in the newsroom lately, Ian, we've been watching like really old football games, and by really old, it's like 2010, 2012. You're around. I know you're like hard at work with your headphones on because you don't want to hear the construction that's going on in the newsroom, which you love. In fact, one day you forgot your headphones and you're like, I'm just leaving.
I was so tilted. It was a tough week.
So what do you listen to while you work?
Excuse me. I have a writing playlist. It's got about 50, 60 songs, all sorts of genre. All the songs is, heavier rock, alternative rap, anything, maybe some oldies on it. It just needs to be catchy. It's got to, get me to forget about the lyrics, get me in a good groove, dance and type. When you dance, you type faster. It's just science.
Okay, this is shocking to me. So this is like carefully curated. How do songs get added onto it? Do they just pop into your mind? Do you just hear them walking around? You're like, you know what? That would be good when I'm writing up these cornerback wide receiver matchups.
Not just any song can get added to the writing playlist. It's got to be over a long period of time, proven grooviness.
Is this Spotify?
Yeah.
I don't mean to like put you in a corner in a place that you don't want to. Would you ever consider sharing this playlist with the listeners?
So here's the wild card you didn't see coming. My Spotify playlist, the name on it is actually Antoine McMichaels, not Ian Hartitz, because I made...
Who is Antoine McMichaels?
It's a name I made up in high school because I didn't want...
For like yourself? This is your alter ego?
I literally just made a Facebook with Antoine McMichaels so I could get a Spotify account because I didn't want my friends in high school to see what songs I was listening to.
Oh, okay. You didn't want to be judged by your music tastes.
Exactly. And I'm over that now.
So you didn't answer my question. Would you ever consider sharing your playlist with the listeners?
Absolutely.
Okay. Because as you said, dancing just makes you write better.
Amen.
I'm learning a lot about you, Ian. I won't talk about the story prior to this podcast, but it's good. I enjoy it. Okay, so today is a big episode as usual. We'll start off with the trades that have happened over the last few days, namely for old wide receivers, and I guess I'm old because I'm calling them 30-plus players old. We'll also do the Thursday Night Football preview, go to some backfields to cover with Ian Hartitz, who's sitting to my right, and then Nick Mensio joins us at the end for his starts and sits column. Again, let's start off with these wide receiver trades and start off with the first one. That's Mohamed Sanu, traded to the New England Patriots. As I mentioned, Mohamed Sanu is 30 years old. He was traded for a 2020 second-round pick. Ian, that's quite a price to pay from the Patriots.
And they didn't just do this on a whim. They apparently wanted to make this deal around the draft and also offered a second-round pick then. The Falcons weren't willing to give it up. And I'm surprised they weren't because you got Calvin freaking Ridley just waiting to get more targets, man. It's interesting. I'm expecting Sanu to come in. They have a Week 10 bye, and so maybe he's not super involved versus the Browns this week versus the Ravens next week. But you got to think they want to have him in the slot, Edelman on one side. You mentioned before the podcast, Edelman's still going to be running most of his routes over the middle, but he has been playing outside with Jacoby Myers there. So Sanu in the slot, Edelman outside. Dorsett on the other side? It seems like Josh Gordon is more hurt than we're being led to believe.
Yeah, something here is a little off, right? Because N'Keal Harry has been practicing, I believe, and might be on track to play. Josh Gordon has played previous games but has been hurt in recent weeks. Something's off on one of those two because I don't think the Patriots just make this move because they're in dire need of wide receivers, because on the surface it doesn't really seem like they are, because in their perfect image of their offense, it's, hey, let's run the football and then throw when we not need to, but when it's most advantageous for us. I also wonder, Ian, if this is them still just not being over having a middle of the field threat like Rob Gronkowski on the roster.
I was just thinking that because we saw Gordon's kind of snaps early in the season. He was playing a lot in the slot, and beat writers even speculating he could be that Gronk, more red zone type threat, and they don't really have that with their current group of guys. So I'm with you there. I'm more interested, I think, in Calvin really than anything. I mean, I really think this guy is incredibly talented, and every time he's gotten even a decent amount of opportunity, he's done nothing but ball out. He's had 5 games with at least 8 targets. And I understand targets lead to production, but only 5 games with 8 targets over the last 2 years. 7 catches, 146 yards, 3 touchdowns, 588, 1, 671, 1, 8 105, 1, and 8 catches, 93, and 1 touchdown. The guy has done nothing except work as a borderline wide receiver 1 without Sanu, and I think we're going to see more of that moving forward.
On the Patriots side of this still, look, I mean, think if another team did this, then we'd be a little more critical than we are being right now. Because Mohamed Sanu isn't a game breaker. Mohamed Sanu might not be a difference maker. Don't you think that's fair? And I understand that the Patriots' window has just been endless, completely. I mean, all these other teams do have windows to win in like a 3-year span. Since Bill Belichick and Tom Brady have joined forces, they have dominated the planet. And so their window has never even caved at all. They are always relevant. But again, a 2020 second-round pick, I understand that that's somewhere in the 60s, but you look at how many, and I know it was a first-round pick last year, how many people across the board criticized the Amari Cooper deal. He's a legitimate difference maker on offense. Mohamed Sanu, 5 TDs is a career high. Last season was a career high with 838 yards. He's a very good role player, but in this Patriot system, role players are what really take them over the top.
Yeah, a second-round pick for a role player is just a lot. And these second-round picks, like the Patriots have consistently traded down from the first round to get the second-round picks because, they're kind of being viewed as the most, especially, in the early 30s and 40s, some of the most valuable draft picks in all football.
So they'll probably get another one, is what we're saying. Okay, the other trade was for 32-year-old Emmanuel Sanders, going from the Denver Broncos to the San Francisco 49ers. In fact, the Broncos packaged a 5th-round pick for him in order to receive a 3rd and a 4th-round pick in the upcoming draft from San Francisco. Look, wide receiver inconsistencies have been the story of the offseason and maybe the early part of the season, even for this undefeated San Francisco team. It might be the one area that is really kind of keeping them back from being viewed as a complete team. I mean, the Dante Pettis storyline heading into the season where his own coach was trying to lift him up by criticizing him repeatedly over and over and over again. You have Trent Taylor, who's missed a considerable amount of time despite drawing tons of buds, again, despite being a slot receiver who is a role player at best. A lot was asked of Deebo Samuel and Jalen Hurd. So now you throw Emmanuel Sanders in the mix.
Yeah, and I really thought Pettis' potential breakout game could have been last week with his snaps and targets going up and Deebo being out, but obviously the Mud Bowl wasn't going to have much passing going for either team. Look, I mean, Sanders helps. We've seen him play this year. It's incredible that he's 32 years old, coming off the Achilles, and he looks this good.
Right.
We were over that. He's back to playing at a pretty high level. With that said, most run-heavy offense in the league, I don't think he's going to be anything more than a fantasy wide receiver 3, more weeks than not. And, I mean, there's a pretty low floor here. I mean, the number 1 cornerbacks they're going to face moving forward is pretty absurd. He has the potential to be shadowed by James Bradbury, Patrick Peterson twice, Yair Alexander, Marlon Humphrey, Marshawn Lattimore, and Jalen Ramsey from now until week 16. I mean, that's not really the type of, I know, wide receiver cornerbacks can be a little bit fickle and they don't line up every single snap or anything like that. And Sanders does play a good amount in the slot, but either way, any way you want to look at it, man, it's a tough upcoming slate.
Yeah, and I think Kyle just looked at his team and be like, I am not happy with this unit. And this is the best team they've had in forever. Yeah. It's a very, very complete and good football team. And having your quarterback who, and I keep saying it every week, I feel like, hasn't, to me, proven that he can be a true signal caller, top 10, 15 quarterback in this league throughout. Giving him more options for just basically a 3rd-round pick because the 4th of where Denver is, or excuse me, where San Francisco is versus where Denver is going to be negligible. Yeah, and you mentioned it. 44 targets, 30 receptions, 367 yards, and 2 touchdowns so far for Emmanuel Sanders. It brings some level of consistency. He's coming from a similar system, so hopefully it's seamless. And it certainly seemed like the 49ers wanted him on their roster this week because they wanted to get the deal done before matching up against the Carolina Panthers.
Now here's the question. What does this mean for Deshaun Hamilton?
Nothing.
What?
I mean, I don't think Deshaun Hamilton is I understand that there's some slot talent there for Deshaun Hamilton, but I also feel like he's one of those talents that we will project more from than what he can really bring us. I think more this just points to Cortland Sutton being the real alpha on that wide receiver group. Remember this offseason, wasn't there a report that he and Emmanuel Sanders got into it together?
Sutton and Sanders did?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't remember that.
I believe so in practice. And I believe John Elway came out and said that, Emmanuel Sanders was having some issues here. We were having some issues with Emmanuel Sanders. And so it was just time for him to go. Put him on a winning team. I'm perfectly cool with it because I think Emmanuel Sanders is one of the more underappreciated wide receivers of the last 5, 6, 7 years.
He's one of those fun divas that just wants the ball. He's not doing anything harmful. He just wants the ball. And why should your best players not want the ball? So I'm cool with Emmanuel Sanders, whatever he wants to do. But no, I agree. Arrow's pointing out for Courtland Sutton. He's had at least 7 targets in every game this season, but no more than 9. So it'll be really interesting to see what he can actually do with some potential double-digit target games. But I don't know, man. I think Deshaun, it's not the worst flyer. Last year when Emmanuel Sanders missed those last 4 games, he had at least 8 targets in every game, finished as a PPR wide receiver 22 in that 4-game stretch. Yeah. I know it's a new quarterback. I know it's a new offense. But, he has at least shown the ability to be a relatively productive wide receiver.
What's interesting is that Denver team opened the season by their offense kind of carrying them to whatever success they were having, and the defense was playing awful. That defense has really bounced back.
Oh, yeah.
It's been playing quite well over the past few weeks, and credit to that team for switching some personnel up on that side of the ball. But then Joe Flacco and company have kind of drained that offensively.
Defense is good as long as they don't trade Chris Harris Jr. like some are speculating.
All right, let's go to the Thursday night football matchup. Why don't we do that, Ian? The Washington Redskins head to Minnesota to take on the Vikings. I'm sure you looked at the line. It's wild. 16-point home favorites, the Vikings are. Expect to score 29 points on their own, over-under of 42. It's never a good thing. We've had a lot of these so far this year where the spread is higher than one team's total. And that's what the Redskins only projected to score 13 points. The Redskins are coming off that awful game against San Francisco, as we just alluded to, with the weather completely bonkers and preventing any offense from getting anything going. But Kirk Cousins over the last 3 games has certainly been fantastic. 325 yards per game, 75 completion percentage, 10 touchdowns versus 1 interception.
Cousins is playing like an MVP candidate over the last month. I mean, he had that god-awful game against the Bears where Thielen, was going out in the media. But since then, he's just dropping dimes downfield, and the Vikings have looked like one of the better offenses in the league. It doesn't look like Thielen will be out there this week with this hamstring injury, but maybe Thielen and Mike Zimmer are saying there's a chance he plays. Every other report's indicating he doesn't. I don't know why they would rush to get him out there in this spot versus giving him some extra time to rest, but the one interesting thing I found in this lead-up is, the Redskins ranked number 1 in DVOA versus wide receiver 1s, dead last against wide receiver 2s. Quentin Dunbar has been PFF's number 1 cornerback this season. Yeah, they're doing a very good job.
Is he still wear number 47?
He might have pipivoted to a 30 number.
Maybe that's the difference. That's probably the difference.
That's the only thing holding Ross Cockrell back right now, too. But, Olabisi Johnson has some streamer appeal if Thielen is ultimately ruled out, just because the Redskins have done a good job taking away number 1 option, but again, brutal versus number 2. And we've seen that. They've held guys like Cooper, Alshon Jeffrey, these different wide receiver 1s relatively in check, but we've seen Deshaun Jackson, Taylor Gabriel, kind of complementary options just ball the hell out.
I could totally see Minnesota going up by 2 touchdowns early, maybe even 17 points early, and then just giving Dalvin Cook 23 carries, giving Alexander Madison 10 carries of his own, and then just running this one away. It's not going to be a close game. It would be shocking if it's a close game. There's been nothing since Bill Callahan has come into the head coaching position that makes me think that, yes, this is definitely a watchable team. In fact, I love Thursday night football games like this because for people who try to watch every game each week, I know I'll be able to shut this one off at halftime and be perfectly content to go to bed early at 10 o'clock on a Thursday, which is rare in your and I's case.
I think the only Washington Redskins need to concern yourself with in fantasy is Terry McLaurin.
For sure. Because he's really good.
Oh, incredible. If you just remove the mud bowl from your mind. And other than that, he's had a touchdown every single game this season. His worst game was 3 catches for 51 yards, but most of that came with Stephon Gilmore in shadow coverage. So even that's a somewhat impressive performance. But yeah, you said it about this new look Bill Callahan offense. 2 weeks, 17 points, 37 pass attempts. Adrian Peterson, 45 touches in that stretch. I would say maybe just you can approach AP, in this revenge game, volume-based play, but he's dealing with a high ankle sprain. He's apparently going to play through. Chris Thompson, turf toe. It's looking like Wendell Smallwood has an outside chance at being the featured back in this brutal spot, but even with that, I wouldn't be shocked if we see someone else kind of come in and split up those reps. You don't want too much exposure to a team applied to score about 13 points.
The Vikings are in a tough spot, and by the way, a week from today on this very episode, we'll bring on Daigle and do a review of every single team after 8 weeks of the NFL season, but kind of looking ahead in that conversation. The Vikings are in an interesting spot. Most likely, they'll be 6-2 after this, but they'll be contending with teams like, the Panthers, the Seahawks, the Rams, the Eagles, the Cowboys for that, like one of those final 1 or 2 playoff spots. A lot of those teams are very evenly matched and even talent. I need to see something that is a dominant portion of the Vikings defense, to be perfectly honest with you, because we know Mike Zimmer and this defense has been extremely talented over the last couple of years. The offense has that. It's the running game, and sure, you can argue with yourself if that's a good thing to have as your dominant quality. But the passing game has now, forcing play action, has elevated that part of the game as well. The defense needs to hold their end of the bargain, and if they do that, then they certainly are a top 6 team in the NFC.
I think it's specifically these group of cornerbacks. I mean, none of Xavier Rhodes,
all 3 were
Trey
beaten
Waynes,
last week.
Mackenzie Alexander. Yeah, they're all outside PFF's top 50, and like you said, I think Marvin got a touchdown on each of them. So
let's take a look at some of these backfields. Let's start with the Detroit Lions. Again, you can check out actually Ian's column, all 32 backfields covered on Rotoworld. Detroit Lions have the New York Giants next. It's a topsy-turvy Lions backfield right now because Kerryon Johnson, I believe, is listed as week to week with a right knee injury. He was wearing a brace. He's on IR?
Yes.
Oh, I missed that.
Sad.
Sorry, I'm not a good host. That means Ty Johnson. He's on IR.
IR, man.
So that's the whole season.
I shed more than one tear, I think, when I heard it. He can return in week 16, but like you're not going to play him in fantasy in week 16.
Oh,
so maybe if the Lions make a playoff
That's my face
push.
of me just not being up on the news. Sorry. Okay, Ty Johnson in
the running back, y'all. Ty Johnson,
who came in relief, saw 10 carries for 29 yards last week, 4 targets for 4 receptions and 28 yards. The Lions are averaging 27 carries per game, if my math is correct. They face the Giants next, a Giants team who we saw Chase Edmonds run all over recently. Do you believe in Ty Johnson enough? What do we think Ty Johnson's role is going to be?
This reminds me of the Wayne Gallman situation from earlier this year. As everything sits right now, Ty Johnson is set up well to be the featured back, more or less 3 downs. We're looking at 60-70% snaps. That's what he was at last week. He's got a great matchup, and like you said, it's a run-first offense. He's going to get the rock. I just don't know that we can expect this guy to have a 3-down role consistently for the rest of the season. J.D. McKissick has been ingrained as their pass-down back all year. They picked up Paul Perkins after getting rid of C.J. Anderson. Hasn't played an offensive snap over the last 2 weeks despite being active. But, again, like Ty Johnson, whatever. I know he was good at Maryland, good yards per carry, athletic guy, pretty decent size.
Super fast.
Still a 6th-round rookie.
Correct.
And what we know about 6th-round rookies, like we saw this with Darvin Thompson recently, like, be careful about projecting these guys that haven't been with the team very long for these featured roles. It would not surprise me in the slightest if they add a veteran to this group, whether it be this week or next week.
Kenyon Drake.
Now, I understand that they have gotten rid of C.J. Anderson. They have gotten rid of Theo Riddick. There were a lot of good reviews coming out of Ty Johnson for training camp. So, again, if nothing changes, there is a scenario where this guy is a great fantasy performer and has a solid role the rest of the year. I don't know though, man. Like I was careful with my fab budget, like not to blow it on him because this is not 2015 David Johnson by any stretch of the imagination. I don't think we should, really guarantee anything here with Ty Johnson.
Remember 2015 Matt Jones? Because Matt Jones and David Johnson kind of won people leagues that year.
Matt Jones, man.
This isn't, a Chase Edmonds situation. This isn't what an Alexander Madison situation could be if, a handcuff comes in a great rushing offense. I'm with you. I do, though, still believe that offensive line talent is just as important as running back talent, if not more.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know where the PFF grades land on this Lions offense, but they've certainly invested a lot in this offensive line. Taylor Decker was a first-round pick. Frank Ragnow was a first-round pick. Graham Glasgow was a third-round pick. So there's talent up there, and I actually have been fascinated and impressed by this Lions offense, much more than I expected heading into the season, just with their ability to take vertical shots and then run the football off of that as well.
Stafford's had like 2 or 3 throws down the field every single game that are just beautiful.
Yep. All right, let's shift on over to the Cardinals backfield. They face the Saints next. Some people were irate about,
to put it mildly,
David Johnson seeing 1 carry at the start of that game and then not playing the rest, and he was listed as kind of like the emergency back. That led to Chase Edmonds seeing 27 carries. Again, 27 carries for 126 yards and 3 touchdowns. And all 3 touchdowns were of 20-plus yards rushing. So 2 things. One, we don't know because Cliff Kingsbury and company just don't want to tell us how significant this injury is for David Johnson. So we don't know what the usage is going to be for either Chase Edmonds or David Johnson. 2, they're also facing the Saints, one of the best defenses in the entire league, especially stopping the run. Yeah. So what's your read on this situation, how you want to use both?
I mean, we knew, like, to get Schefter to say David Johnson could play last week, I mean, I don't blame people for putting him in the lineup, but we talked about this last week. He did not look anything close to 100% in week 6 when he was out there. So not entirely surprising to see Chase Edmonds have the bigger role. Now, position high, 94% snaps among all running backs last week. That was a little bit surprising, but I think it's going to be a Chase Edmonds show again. They did add Alfred Morris, but it's a scary comparison. It reminds me of when the Texans added Carlos Hyde, because like he shouldn't. When they had Duke Johnson, I was like, okay, here's an early down grinder that's not going to take away any of the pass down work. Ideally, he's just a 10 to 15% snap backup. But we'll see how that plays out. I'm not worried about Alfred Morris for right now.
No.
So hopefully he's not involved. But yeah, it should be Chase Edmonds, man. And the big thing with this is no matter who's been running the ball this year, they've had huge holes. And it's not the offensive line, really, I don't think. PFF grades them as the 30th ranked run blocking unit, but their Football Outsiders 13th in adjusted line yards per rush. What's that mean? Cliff Kingsbury's doing a great job scheming these guys into open space consistently.
Yeah, Cliff hasn't done a good job, and I still contend this in the passing game necessarily. After defenses started taking away those slot fades and everything was running through the slot wide receivers, and maybe because that's the lack of talent on the outside. But what he has been doing the last few weeks is, and especially this past week, Kyler didn't have to carry this offense for the first time at all this season. And so much of it are these outside and inside runs where he's making linebackers stand still and also pulling offensive linemen in the way of these running backs. And he's destroying the edges of these defenses. And having that open space, as we just talked about with the Lions, is pivotal for running back success. And, he might have been, a 3rd or a 4th round pick. But Chase Edmonds is a very talented football player. And so allowing him to get in that open space, like you just mentioned, is awesome. At some point, I hope that Cliff is able to do something more with that passing game, and maybe it can help with Christian Kirk coming back soon. But right now, he's really making his money and making his mark in that running game, and Kyler's still making 1, 2, or 3, or 4 throws every single game. Yeah,
I would. So just to sum up this backfield, I would hope that after kind of the backlash from this last week, Kingsbury's a little more vocal about, David Johnson looks back to 100%.
I bet he won't be.
I would hope he will, maybe not, but because he might not be, we got to be pay close attention to practice reports. If he doesn't get a full practice in this week, I don't know that you can fire him up as anything other than boomer bust, running back 3. And I think Edmonds, if Johnson's active again without having a full practice, put Edmonds in.
Yeah, even against the Saints. Okay, yep. Los Angeles Rams face the Cincinnati Bengals this week. We know that Todd Gurley a couple weeks ago saw 93% of the snaps. He missed the following week on a longer week with a hurt quad. And then he bounced back this past weekend with 61% of the snaps in an absolute blowout. But that 61% of the snaps translated to 18 carries for just 41 yards, still is just seeing 1 target. Darrell Henderson in that same blowout, 11 carries for 31 yards. And that's not even considering Malcolm Brown, who set out this game as well.
Gurley had 9 games in each of 2017 and 2018 with at least 20 touches. 0 so far this year. They just aren't feeding him the same amount. And yeah, he had the 61% snap rate. I was like, okay, blowout, maybe that's closer to 70, but Darrell Henderson was at 34%, and they used John Kelly as the mop-up back. Henderson was a legit change of pace back this week. It was not one of these situations where, Alexander Mattison getting 10 carries in the 4th quarter.
Don't hate, Ian. You're such a hater on Alexander Mattison for 0 reason. He's a good player that is the number 1 handcuff in fantasy football.
He's a very good early down grinder. We'll see if he can catch a ball one of these days. And the other thing that's hurting Gurley is not only are his total touches down, where has the pass game usage with this guy gone? We saw the great contested catch he made last week. He can still do it. Only the Ravens have fewer targets to their running backs per game this season than the Rams. The bottom 5 teams are pretty much running quarterbacks and the Titans, who have Derrick Henry on the field most of the time. That makes sense. And then you just have the Rams, who can't get Goff really going. They have capable receiving running backs, and they aren't getting him the ball. Obviously, Sean McVay will always have a million times more football knowledge than I will. But it's just confusing to see, Gurley not really be utilized in this way. I think that is why we've seen Gerald Everett kind of get the more consistent receiving role, but it's been at the expense of Gurley so far.
Yeah, in 2017, Todd Gurley had 87 targets for ultimately 788 yards. 2018 last year, 81 targets for 580 yards. This year, just 23 targets so far for a whopping 81 yards. I mean, that goes from a yards per reception of 12 down to 10, down to just over 5 this year. It's a major factor. When you just watch that Rams offense for the past few years, you were stunned by how wide open the running backs were as a check down, and that was a lot of the numbers and production for Jared Goff out of the backfield as well, just dumping it off. But that's just not there. And as we always seem to mention, I think that's not because no new wrinkles have been made from these running backs. It's more so let's keep doing the same, and now defenses know how to stop it.
Yeah, Goff's, we talked about
a decline in talent by Todd Gurley, I should say.
True. And we talked about Goff's deep ball rate being lower, so obviously teams are, more willing to crowd the box and maybe take away some of those checkdowns. Luckily, none of this should really be a problem this week against the Bengals, league worst defense and fantasy points allowed to running backs.
So, before we close, how confident are you playing Todd Gurley? How confident are you in player Darrell Henderson? Is Darrell Henderson worthy of a flex spot?
I would not. I'd lean away from Henderson as anything other than a DFS kind of tournament play, but I think Gurley mid to high end RB2 this week. I mean, it's best case matchup, and even last week on the 61% snaps, like you said, he had 18 carries. I mean, 15 to 20 touches. It's not what we're used to from Gurley, but in an offense projected to score probably between 25 and 30 points. I haven't seen the implied total, but something around there, we'll take that.
Again, that was Ian Hartitz taking stock of all 32 NFL teams. You can check out his column up on Rotoworld right now. Let's shift on over to Nick Mensio with his starts and sits of the weekend. Notable ones. Nick, let's start off with a start. That's A.J. Brown, the rookie wide receiver with the Tennessee Titans, facing the Tampa Bay Bucks this week. Nick, he went 8 targets, 6 catches, 64 yards against the Chargers last week, and you're in on him this weekend as well.
Yeah, like you said, those 6 catches and 8 targets last week, those were season highs for Brown. His playing time has spiked the past 3 weeks, up to about 62% from 45% the first 4 weeks. Still a lot of room for growth here, but Brown's still third among Titans wideouts and routes, trailing only Corey Davis and slot man Adam Humphries. Only Davis has drawn more targets on the team, and I think it's notable that Brown probably ran a lot with Ryan Tannehill's group in the summer and preseason practices, so they probably have a good connection. They get a great matchup in this spot. The Bucks have just been creamed by receivers. They're 25th in pass defense DVOA, 26th in opponent plays per game. This is a total pass funnel defense. They're stamping out run games. So receivers against these guys in the past 3 games against the Bucks, DJ Moore had 7 catches, Curtis Samuel had 4 catches and 2 touchdowns against them. 2 weeks ago, Michael Thomas had 11 catches for 182 yards and 2 touchdowns. And Robert Woods had 13 catches for 164 scoreless yards. I mean, all that happened in the last 3 games. So I think Brown's definitely in play as a wide receiver 3 this week.
Definitely a great matchup this week. And even moving forward, man, they have the 5th best schedule and points per reception per game allowed the wide receivers next 4 weeks. Single best schedule in weeks 14 to 16 for the fantasy playoffs. How confident are you, Nick, that maybe Tannehill can elevate not only A.J. Brown but Corey Davis to be fantasy relevant factors moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally agree with you. I think Davis is definitely in play this week as well. I mean, I like Brown's big playability more than Davis's, so I'm just leaning a little slightly more with him.
Yeah, I rank the rookies every week on Rotoworld, and A.J. Brown has had to live on these big plays that he's individually created. I mean, you look at week 1, you look at it against Atlanta, like it was all yards after the catch. And who would have thought that here, in week 8, that Ryan Tannehill would be the player to unlock a passing offense. But it's absolutely true because Marcus Mariota with A.J. Brown, I mean, A.J. Brown was averaging less than 4 targets per game with him and just over 2 receptions. I say it seems like every week, but if A.J. Brown was getting the kind of volume that DK Metcalf was getting, if he was getting the same kind of volume that Terry McLaurin was getting, then he would be mentioned among these elite rookie wide receivers because he is fantastic on the field. So, Nick, I'm definitely with you on that. Even if he doesn't get the big play, 8 targets exactly what we want maybe out of wide receiver 3 with that big play upside. Okay, let's go to Kenny Stills now with the Houston Texans facing the Oakland Raiders. Another start for you, Nick. Last week, 5 targets, 4 receptions, 105 yards against the Colts after he stepped in for an injured Will Fuller.
Yeah, played 94% of the snaps last week after Fuller's hamstring pull. Fuller's expected to miss several weeks, quote unquote, locking Stills and Kiki QT into the numbers 2 and 3 receiver jobs there in Houston. I don't see Stills being a high volume hog for Deshaun Watson, but he offers mammoth big playability. Should slide right into Fuller's role pretty seamlessly. Couldn't ask for a better Week 8 opponent. The Raiders are 30th in pass defense DVOA, 31st in fantasy points allowed to receivers. Just got obliterated by Aaron Rodgers last week. Had Marquez Valdez-Scantling go for 2 catches, 133 yards on a touchdown. Jake Kumro had a touchdown in that game with over 50 yards. Allen Robinson had 7 catches, 97 yards, and 2 touchdowns with Chase Daniel throwing him the ball against the Raiders in London 2 weeks ago. The Texans' implied team total of 29 points is 3rd best of the week. So this is just a dream spot for Stills. He was one of the top waiver pickups this week.
It's interesting because Stills was kind of like a throwaway in that trade for Laramie Tunsil. I know he wasn't happy, certainly, in Miami, but he can really fit in a lot of the ways that Will Fuller was as well. Because a lot of times in previous years, Nick, like when Will Fuller would go down, they would lose that element across from DeAndre Hopkins. And I'm not going to say they're similar talents or the same talents, but a lot of the same ways that Will Fuller wins, Kenny Stills wins as well. So a lot of that production and big playability, like you mentioned, is definitely something we can hope for in Kenny Stills. Okay, next up, starting with the sits, Jarvis Landry at the New England Patriots. I know we want to avoid the New England Patriots, but Jarvis Landry, I believe, has been the Browns' wide receiver 1 this year, which is just a mistake and a microcosm of their offense. Last time we saw him, Nick, he had 5 targets, 3 catches, 36 yards against Seattle. But prior to that, 75 yards and 167 yards. You're banking on a down week here for Landry against the Pats.
Yeah, I believe Odell Beckham is like the wide receiver 42 and a half PPR points per game. And
Let's
then Landry is the... Are we restarting?
No. That was a joke. Sorry. Nick, that was just a restart the season for the Browns. I think I, emulated all Browns fans with that statement. I apologize.
Yeah, like I said, but Odell Beckham, wide receiver 42 and a half PPR, and then it's Landry at the wide receiver 44. So neither of these guys has been like extremely usable in fantasy yet. Barely wide receiver 4 flex plays right now. Landry, though, like you mentioned, his volume's there. He's seeing 7.3 targets per game. Has seen at least 5 in all 6 games at this point. I mean, the problem for the Browns has obviously been Baker Mayfield behind this offensive line, but they're coming off a bye and catching the Patriots on a short week. I like that for Landry a little bit, but, I mean, it's just hard to trust anyone going up against this defense. I mean, the Browns' implied total of 16.5 is 3rd worst of the week. The Patriots have allowed just 1 touchdown to receivers. You can look at this and see Golden Tate was the one that put that touchdown on the Patriots with the 6 catches, 102 yards on the score a couple weeks ago out of the slot. So that's where Landry runs his routes, but they just stamped out Jameson Crowder last week. I mean, it's just not a enticing play for me at all.
Yeah, I mean, Golden Tate got the touchdown like you said, but it's such a tough secondary even after Stephon Gilmore. I mean, Jonathan Jones, Jason McCourty. 16 straight games, the Patriots haven't allowed a 300-yard passer. Baker Mayfield does not seem poised to do so.
No, not at all, especially with that offensive line, how it played. And obviously the Patriots defensive line, despite lacking maybe 1 or 2 top talents as a unit, is just incredible. Okay, let's close out here, Nick, with another sit. Curtis Samuel against the San Francisco 49ers. We know that Kyle Allen is a starting quarterback. We know that the Panthers are coming off a bye. I think prior to that bye, we talked about on this show how Curtis Samuel was a good play, at least you did, because he was facing Tampa Bay. I didn't think he could really be unleashed, or a wide receiver could, because Kyle Allen doesn't really throw it on the field that much, but they got him involved in the running game, 1 rushing touchdown, and then enough in the passing game, especially near the end zone, for 6 targets, 4 catches, 70 yards, and a score. So that's a big performance, Nick, coming off of to now bench Curtis Samuel against one of the best defenses in the NFL.
Yeah, Samuel was the overall wide receiver 4 that week against the Bucs in Week 6. Like you said, scored a pair of touchdowns, 1 on the ground and one receiving score. He's still had a productive season to this point, but he catches a really tough draw this week against the Niners. They're number 1 in opponent plays per game, number 2 in pass defense DVOA, number 5 in fantasy points allowed to receivers. Kyle Allen making another start. I mean, no one's really expecting him to go into San Francisco, put up a big number against Robert Saleh's defense. Carolina's implied team total of 18 points is 5th lowest of the week. The Niners just eliminated Terry McLaurin for 1 catch for 11 scoreless yards last week. Held all 3 Rams receivers of Brandon Cooks, Cooper Kupp, and Robert Woods scoreless and under 20 yards the week before that. And Odell Beckham had just 2 catches for 27 scoreless yards against San Francisco in the game before that. So, I mean, I'm not seeing anything to even warrant putting Samuel in season-long lineups. I mean, I'm treating him as a wide receiver 5-6 for this spot.
brutal matchup this week, and then not too much easier with Titans and Packers the next 2 weeks. Then they get Falcons, Saints, Redskins, Falcons. Josh, you said this before. Like, I think we probably need to wait till Cam gets back in the lineup before firing up Samuel, and probably DJ Moore too, with any sort of confidence.
And Cam is back at practice on a limited basis along the sideline. I wouldn't be surprised if this is Kyle Allen's last start. I would expect him to get roughed up against the San Francisco 49ers, to be perfectly honest with you. And if that's the case, then I think his play will match his skills. And then everyone would be like, yes, time for Cam Newton to come back, which should have been the line of thinking throughout all this. Okay, you can check out Nick's entire starts and sits. There's like 20 of them. I'm just making up a number, but it feels like a lot in his column up on Rotoworld right now. Again, you can check out Ian's taking stock of all 32 backfields. We'll be back here tomorrow. Myself, Hayden Winks, John Daigle, to preview 9 games, the big 9 games of the weekend. And as always, go and check out Rotoworld Live, noon Eastern's, twitch.tv/Rotoworld for your most favorite, the best pregame show in the universe, answering your start set questions. All right, talk to y'all soon. See ya.